Now, the Three Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Garrity.
And welcome, everyone, to the Wednesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch, along with Jim Garrity of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. We have good, bad, and crazy martinis for conservatives today. But, Jim, first, some helpful advice, potentially. There's a lot of people out there who are not at all enthused about having to choose between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump to be the next president of the United States. Now, this might seem a bit drastic, but Mary Ann Noland of Richmond, Virginia, may have found a way out of having to make that choice. This is her obituary in the Richmond Times-Dispatch. Mary Ann Alfred Noland, faced with the prospect of voting for either Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, Mary Ann Noland of Richmond chose instead to pass into the eternal love of God on Sunday, May 15th, 2016, at the age of 68. This is a woman who was a nurse. She was very well beloved, a woman of great faith, and CNN actually interviewed her family, saying that this was more of an attempt by her son, who wrote the obituary, to show her style of humor than to disparage either campaign. But, Jim, there are extreme ways out of this dilemma, I guess.
Yeah, it's almost an endorsement of SMOD, the smoking meteor of death, or the sweet meteor of death. Which, the astrologers or astronomers argue may be on its way, and people say that it's going to have a huge impact on the elections and would really crush supporters of Hillary and Trump in swing states, really all states, and planet Earth.
Our condolences to Mary Ann's family. They seem like a lovely family, and she did suffer from lung cancer, so our thoughts are with her family. But that was a fantastic way to start that obituary by her son. On to the good martini today. And Jim, one of the things we've been concerned about since Trump has become the presumptive Republican nominee, and that is down-ballot impact, because Trump is not very popular, in case folks haven't figured that out with the general electorate. But in the critical state, potentially, of New Hampshire, a state that the Republicans have not won since George W. Bush squeaked it out in 2000, Hillary Clinton currently holds a 2-point lead over Donald Trump, 42-40. With the leaners, it's 44-42. Oddly enough, when you factor in Mitt Romney, who would get 21% of the vote in a three-way race, Hillary still somehow leads Donald Trump. But since that's not likely to happen, we won't pay that much attention. On the Senate side, though, Kelly Ayotte, the Republican, running for a second term in a very tight race with the Democratic governor there, Maggie Hassan. And right now, with the initial preference, it's 46-45. Ayotte is behind. It's 48-46 with leaners factored in. So, Jim, that was going to be a tough race anyway. Ayotte's favorables are lower than the governor's, and so the fact that it's essentially a statistical dead heat means that Trump being on the ballot doesn't really have that big of an impact.
Yeah, and we should insert all appropriate caveats. This is a state that it's obviously pretty early in the cycle. Whenever you have a sitting governor running against you, they have a lot of institutional advantages, very high name ID. Democrats will be motivated, and this is a state Republicans have had a very tough time winning in presidential years for the last couple of cycles. Having said that, the nightmare scenario is that Trump became the nominee. New Hampshire is not a state where he won the primary, but there's some debate about whether he was going to really match well with that frequently described as flinty, red flannel-wearing New Hampshire Republican. So far, this is very much in line with the Quinnipiac polls that had Trump running pretty close to Hillary in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Florida. So, and this is, look, there's still time for this to change. It's possible Democrats will unify around Hillary. Once their primary is done, it's possible Trump will wear out the American people. But at least so far, that head-to-head polling advantage that she seemed to be running up during the primaries has evaporated. As a lot more suburban Republicans who seemed wary of Trump are jumping on board. And if nothing else, it looks like he's not going to get blown out in these states, at least according to these initial numbers. Good news for the senator. She's obviously got she's going to have a tough race any way you want to shake it. But at the point where we thought this was going to be a disaster scenario hasn't come to fruition yet. And if you're a Democrat, you probably were counting on a state like New Hampshire being relatively easy pickings this cycle, and it doesn't look like it's going to be that.
The favorable unfavorables here are hilarious. Hillary Clinton underwater 58-35, Trump 58-33, even Romney 52-32. Bernie Sanders, by the way, plus 21 on that scale, 55 to 34. He would beat Trump 54 to 38. So the Democratic governor up there, Maggie Hassan, who supported Hillary, probably actually wishes Bernie was the nominee because his coattails would be a lot more effective than Hillary's up there. And it's fun, Jim, to watch the cable news networks now get really mad at Bernie Sanders supporters in Nevada and beyond because they're getting nervous about the fact that he keeps beating her even though she's going to win the nomination.
You're ruining it! Stop! Go away! That's kind of the subtext of.
Yes. Bernie won Oregon last night, for those who don't know, and he almost won Kentucky. So he's got 21 wins now, and we'll continue on. We continue on to the bad Martini. And, Jim, we've talked about this in the wake, I believe, of the New Hampshire debate when the Republican candidates were asked about whether or not the military should require women to register for selective service, which, if the draft is ever brought back, means women would be subject to the draft as well. And since combat roles are now open to women, that would be part of the draft potentially as well. Duncan Hunter, a congressman from California, proposed an amendment that he actually opposed just to see where the sentiment was on Capitol Hill. It actually got passed on the House Armed Services Committee. The House Rules Committee has now yanked that out of the defense bill, so it won't be part of the House version. Not to be outdone, however, this is according to the New York Times, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell on Tuesday said that he believed the role of women in the military had expanded so broadly in recent years that they should be required to register for the draft just as men do. Mr. McConnell, Republican of Kentucky, was quick to stress that he did not envision any return to the use of the selective service and believed that the volunteer professional military had been very successful. It's worth pointing out that John McCain surreptitiously slipped this back into the Senate version of the defense bill, so we'll see how it shakes out on Capitol Hill. But, Jim, the idea that, this needs to happen, but don't worry, we're never going to have a draft seems like a really stupid approach.
Do you remember in the New Hampshire debate where I believe it was on ABC, and other than Mary Catherine Ham and Larry O'Connor, the questions were generally terrible, but one of them was on this, and much to my surprise, a lot of the Republican candidates supported this idea. I believe both Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio did. And I'm just kind of left scratching my head because is there a big demographic out there that's yearning for young women to have to register for the draft? Are there people clamoring for this? Even, this, I can imagine this being a big argument for feminists, and I guess really whiny men who think it's unfair that they have to register for the draft and women don't. It just kind of struck me as, even if you thought it was a good idea, and I don't, I think it's a terrible idea, I didn't strike me as a wise politics. And in fact, it seemed like you were being set up for the next version of the war on women. Because, quite literally, Republicans will send your daughters into war. It just seemed like a bizarre, out-of-nowhere issue. And just see Mitch McConnell saying, yeah, we should do this, on top of lots of other Republicans, just seems baffling. And so, there are times I've been a defender of Mitch McConnell and said he's not as bad as all the critics are doing. But then he goes out and does something like this. There is a baffling logic at work on Capitol Hill. And if Republicans aren't careful, I could see the Democrats using this issue and trying to say that warmongering Republicans are going to send your daughters off to war. And it just seems like a just baffling, deeply frustrating thinking at work up on Capitol Hill.
No, I think you're right, but I also think they're trying to make sure that they don't get accused of being anti-woman from the other side, because the Democrats are the ones that always champion this barrier being eclipsed in the military, including roles for women. And so it's Obama, I think it was Leon Panetta, the defense secretary, that really got the ball rolling on this. And then ultimately it was Ash Carter who sheepishly made the announcement that all ground combat operations were going to be open to women. And so I think that they expect to be bashed from the other side, and that's why they were hopping over there, but it just makes no sense.
Yeah, you're going to get bashed either way, so you might as well stand for what you actually believe in.
Yes.
And maybe this is genuinely what they actually believe in, but I just got to figure that even the most ardent young feminist woman who is not enlisted in the military isn't like, ooh, I can't wait for the day I get drafted.
Right.
I just have a hard time believing that there's this large mass of young women out there clamoring for the chance to do this. I don't mean chance to serve in the military. I mean chance to register for the draft, register for selective service. McConnell's right. We'll probably never bring back the draft ever unless, the day we bring back the draft, we probably have some other bigger problem, like a city being nuked or something like that. It strikes me as a potential real landmine, no pun intended, for the Republican leadership, and I just don't see why McConnell's got to head down this path.
Yeah, exactly. And this idea that, well, they have the opportunity to pursue these ground combat roles. No, that's not how the military works. That's not how any of this works. If you qualify physically, and those standards are up for debate, it seems like, in some quarters right now, if you qualify and they think you're able to be sent there, you're going to get sent there whether you want to or not. That's kind of how orders work in that environment. But speaking of nuking cities, let's move on to the crazy Martini now. And this is from Reuters. Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump said on Tuesday he is willing to talk to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to try to stop Pyongyang's nuclear program, proposing a major shift in U.S. policy toward the isolated nation. Reuters was kind enough to record this conversation, and here's how that part of it went.
I would speak to him. I would have no problem speaking to him. At the same time, I would put a lot of pressure on China because economically we have tremendous power over China. People don't realize that. They are extracting vast billions of dollars out of our country, billions, and we have tremendous power over China. China can solve that problem with one meeting or one phone call.
How would they do it?
Because they have tremendous power over North Korea.
But North Korea has nukes.
I know that. And so does China, by the way.
But you say you talk to Kim.
I would speak to him. I have no problem with speaking to him.
Two things in that clip, Jim. First of all, the more recordings of Trump with reporters like that come out, Trump will look like a genius with that girl saying that, but North Korea has nukes. But the idea of Trump sitting down with Kim Jong-un is incredibly comical on the surface. Hopefully, Secretary of State Dennis Rodman will be able to provide some needed balance during those talks.
You beat me to the punchline.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's why. I mean, this is a terrible idea. Maybe it's the cycle has just been pummeling my brain for so long. There's a part of me that's looking at this and saying, well, it would probably end with nuclear holocaust, but along the way, it would be really entertaining. I mean, I don't know about you. I would pay pay-per-view to watch Donald Trump negotiate with Kim Jong-un. Probably the two least trustworthy men on the planet, with more record of breaking promises and breaking pledges and more bluster and more threats than ever. It'd be fascinating to watch. And by the end of it, it would end up with like a new casino in Pyongyang. And some sort of like radioactive material being shipped to Atlantic City or something like that. It would turn out something like that. The other thing is, Greg, do you remember way back in 2008, there's a Democratic debate and the YouTube video asks, then Senator Obama, will you meet separately without precondition during the first year of your administration in Washington or anywhere else with the leaders of Iran, Syria, Venezuela, Cuba, and North Korea? And Obama says yes. Now, it's interesting to kind of look back 8 years, and he has met with leaders of Cuba, leaders of Venezuela. I remember one of the summits that was, he posed for a picture with Chavez. Syria, well, we know how that turned out. Iran, he hasn't met personally, but obviously we have the great big Iran deal. And North Korea kind of stands alone. But remember when Republicans didn't like that idea?
Right.
We yes. thought that, if you're going to have a big meeting with some hostile state, they had to at least demonstrate some good behavior. They had to make some sort of concessions. There had to be some indication that we weren't just handing them a PR victory. Yeah, good times, Greg.
It'll be the best deal, though. He'll do so much better with the deal.
Best deal, yeah, huge deal.
The good thing about this, though, is that neither of these guys is very temperamental, and any personal slights will just roll right off their backs.
What are the odds of something going wrong? Sell your real estate in Seoul, South Korea right now.
Trump will look like the mild-mannered, respectable deportment guy compared to Kim Jong-un.
Calm down. Behave normally from Donald Trump. That's when you know. I can't wait until Trump comes out of the meeting and then comments about Kim Jong-un's weight problem. I mean, he's a fat guy. He's an enormously fat guy. Really needs to hit a salad once in a while. I heard they had famine there. Apparently he missed that. So that's the good news, America. Can't wait. Happy Wednesday, everyone.
Jim Garrity of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Jim is off for the next couple of days, but he'll be back on Monday. Tune in on Thursday, though, for the very next 3 Martini Lunch.